Steve Harvey had been hosting Family Feud for over 18 years, and during that time he had cultivated a persona built on quick wit, playful banter, and an ability to find humor in almost any situation. His infectious laughter and comedic timing had become hallmarks of the show, creating an atmosphere where families felt comfortable enough to relax and enjoy themselves even under the pressure of competition and cameras. But on that humid April afternoon in 2025, he would encounter a moment that would require him to set aside his entertainer persona entirely and step into a different role altogether. What began as a seemingly lighthearted exchange would transform into a profound conversation about financial control, power imbalances in marriage, and the ways in which economic dependence can trap people in situations they never intended to remain in. The shift in Steve's demeanor from playful host to serious advocate would signal to everyone in the studio that they were witnessing something far more important than a game show moment. If you value content that addresses the serious challenges many families face regarding financial equity and respect in relationships, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support enables us to continue sharing stories that examine the complex realities of marriage and family dynamics, stories that might help someone recognize their own situation and find the courage to address it. The Morrison family from Indianapolis, Indiana stood ready to compete against the Parker family from Columbus, Ohio. The Morrison family consisted of Kenneth Morrison, age 51, who worked as a senior financial advisor at a wealth management firm, where he had built a successful career helping affluent clients manage their investments and plan for their financial futures. Standing beside him was his wife, Diane Morrison, age 49, who introduced herself with noticeable hesitation as a homemaker who had previously worked as a certified public accountant before leaving the profession 12 years earlier when their second child was born. Their daughter, Sarah, age 26, worked as a software engineer at a technology company in Chicago and had traveled home to participate in the show with her family. Their son, Jason, age 23, was completing his final year of medical school at Indiana University. Completing the family was Kenneth's sister, Patricia, age 47, who worked as a high school mathematics teacher and had known Diane since before her marriage to Kenneth. From the initial family introductions, Steve Harvey observed subtle but concerning dynamics between Kenneth and Diane. When Diane mentioned her previous career as a CPA, Kenneth interjected with a comment that seemed designed to minimize her professional accomplishments. He noted that she had only worked for a few years before becoming a mother, and that her primary contribution to the family had been managing their household rather than pursuing a career. The comment was delivered with a smile, as though it were a simple statement of fact rather than a potentially dismissive characterization of his wife's choices and contributions. Diane's expression tightened slightly at the interruption, but she said nothing, simply nodding in acknowledgement of her husband's words. The game progressed through the opening rounds with the Morrison family demonstrating strong performance and maintaining a comfortable lead over the Parker family. Kenneth was particularly vocal throughout the game, offering strategic advice to other family members and celebrating correct answers with enthusiasm. Diane participated when her turn came, providing solid responses that added points to the board, but she maintained a reserved demeanor that suggested someone who was carefully monitoring her words and actions to avoid making mistakes. Then came the question that would shift the entire tone of the game and transform Steve Harvey from entertainer to serious advocate for someone who clearly needed support. Steve walked to the center of the stage and read from the card with his characteristic energy. "We surveyed 100 people. Top 8 answers on the board. Name something a wife should have control over in a marriage." The question seemed straightforward enough, designed to elicit responses about household decisions, child-rearing choices, or perhaps personal matters that fell within traditional spheres of female authority in families. Kenneth buzzed in first and answered with what appeared to be genuine thoughtfulness. Her own schedule and how she spends her time. The answer was on the board at number 5 with 15 points. Morrison family chose to play, and they moved into position along the playing board to continue answering. Sarah was next in line. She thought for a moment before responding. Decisions about the children's education and activities. The answer revealed itself on the board at number 3 with 22 points. The audience applauded, recognizing this as a reasonable and common division of responsibility in many families. Jason followed with his answer. Her own career choices and professional development. His response carried a slight edge that suggested he might be speaking to something he had observed in his own family rather than offering an abstract answer. The board showed this as number 7 with 11 points. Patricia was next. When Steve posed the question to her, she glanced briefly at Diane before answering. Her own money and financial decisions. The answer appeared on the board at number 2 with 28 points, indicating that a significant portion of survey respondents believed wives should have financial autonomy within their marriages. Then it was Diane's turn. Steve walked over to her with his microphone, and as he approached, he noticed that her hands were trembling slightly and that she was breathing in the careful, controlled way of someone who was struggling to maintain composure. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried an undercurrent of emotion that immediately caught Steve's attention. I wish I could answer this question honestly, but the truth is that I do not have control over anything in my marriage. The words came out in a rush, as though she had been holding them back for so long that once she started speaking, she could not stop. The studio fell silent, the sudden shift in tone catching everyone off guard. Steve's expression changed immediately. The playful entertainer disappeared, replaced by someone who recognized that he was witnessing a woman in distress making a cry for help in the only way available to her. He set down his cards and moved closer to Diane, his voice gentle but serious. Diane, what do you mean you do not have control over anything? Talk to me about what is going on. Diane looked at her husband, then at her children, and then back at Steve. Tears were beginning to form in her eyes, but she continued speaking, her voice growing stronger with each word. Kenneth controls all of our money. Every single dollar that comes into our household goes into accounts that only he has access to. I do not have a bank account in my name. I do not have a credit card in my name. If I need money for groceries or gas or anything else, I have to ask Kenneth for it, and he decides whether what I am asking for is reasonable or necessary. The studio remained completely silent. Kenneth's face had gone pale, and he appeared to be in shock that his wife was sharing such personal financial information on national television. Sarah and Jason both looked stricken, their expressions suggesting that they had been aware of this situation, but had not fully understood its implications until hearing their mother describe it so plainly. Diane continued, her words coming faster now as though a dam had broken. I gave up my career as a CPA 12 years ago because Kenneth said it made more sense for me to stay home with the children rather than paying for childcare. He said we would be partners in this decision, that even though I would not be earning an income, I would still have equal say in our financial decisions because managing the household was just as valuable as earning money. But that is not what happened. Instead, I became completely financially dependent on him, and he used that dependence to control every aspect of my life. She turned to face Kenneth directly, her voice filled with years of accumulated frustration and hurt. You decide what we spend money on. You decide what is worth buying and what is wasteful. You monitor every purchase I make and question me about why I bought something or whether I really needed it. You have made me feel like I have to justify asking for money to buy groceries for our family or clothes for our children. You have made me feel like a child asking her parent for an allowance rather than like an equal partner in a marriage. Kenneth attempted to respond, but Steve held up his hand to stop him. No, Kenneth. Right now, you are going to listen to what your wife is telling you. You will have your chance to speak, but first she needs to finish. Steve's voice carried an authority that made clear this was not negotiable. Diane took a shaky breath and continued. The worst part is that I have professional skills and experience. I was a CPA. I managed complex financial accounts for corporate clients. I understood budgets and investments and tax planning. But I have been out of the workforce for 12 years now, and my license has lapsed. I do not have recent experience or current certifications. So even though I want to leave, even though I want to reclaim my independence and my dignity, I feel trapped because I have no money of my own and no clear path back into my profession after being away for so long. She paused, wiping tears from her face. Every day I wake up and I feel the weight of my dependence on Kenneth. Every time I need something and have to ask him for money, I feel a little more of my self-respect erode. Every time he questions my spending or makes me feel like I am being wasteful or irresponsible with his money, even though I am spending it on things our family needs, I feel smaller and more powerless. This is not the partnership I thought I was entering into when I married him. This is not the life I wanted. The audience was completely silent, many people visibly moved by Diane's words. Several women in the audience were crying, perhaps recognizing their own experiences in what Diane was describing. Steve Harvey stood very still, his expression showing profound concern and compassion. When he spoke, His voice was serious and carried none of his usual playful energy. Diane, what you are describing is called financial abuse. It is a form of domestic abuse that people often do not recognize or talk about because it does not leave physical bruises. But it is just as damaging and just as controlling as other forms of abuse. When one partner controls all the money in a relationship and uses that control to make the other partner feel powerless and dependent, that is abuse. He turned to address Kenneth directly, his expression stern. Kenneth, you work as a financial advisor. You help people manage their money and plan for their futures. But according to your wife, you have denied her any control over the money in your own household. You have made her completely dependent on you financially, and you have used that dependence to control her choices and her life. How do you justify that? Kenneth looked defensive and uncomfortable. When he spoke, his voice carried an edge of anger mixed with what might have been embarrassment at being called out so publicly. Steve, with all due respect, you do not understand our situation. I am the one who earns the income in our family. I am the one who has built a successful career. It makes sense that I should manage our finances because that is my area of expertise. Diane does not understand investments or tax strategies or financial planning at the level that I do. Steve's expression hardened. Kenneth, your wife just told you that she was a CPA. She told you that she managed complex financial accounts for corporate clients. She clearly understands money and financial management. So your claim that she does not have the expertise to be involved in your household finances is not just insulting, it is demonstrably false. He continued, his voice growing firmer. What you are really saying is that because you earn the money, you believe you have the right to control it completely. You believe that Diane's contributions to your family, raising your children and managing your household, do not entitle her to equal access to the resources that support that family. You have created a power imbalance in your marriage where you hold all the cards and she has none, and you have done so deliberately. Sarah spoke up, her voice shaking with emotion. Dad, Mom is right about everything she just said. I have watched you treat her this way my entire life. I have watched you make her ask for money like she is a child. I have watched you question her spending and make her feel guilty for buying things we needed. I have watched her become smaller and quieter over the years as you took away more and more of her autonomy and independence. Jason added his voice to his sister's. Dad, when I was applying to medical schools, you and I had extensive conversations about which schools made the most financial sense and how we would pay for my education. But Mom was not part of those conversations, even though they directly affected our family's finances. You treated her like her input did not matter, like decisions about our family's money were yours alone to make. Patricia, who had been standing quietly, finally spoke. Her voice was measured but carried unmistakable anger. Kenneth, I have known Diane since before you married her. She was confident and independent and brilliant at her work. Over the years of your marriage, I have watched that confidence and independence slowly disappear. I have watched her become anxious and hesitant, always second-guessing herself and seeking approval before making decisions. I blamed it on the stress of motherhood or the challenges of managing a household. But listening to her now, I realized that what I was actually witnessing was you systematically breaking down her sense of self-worth and autonomy through financial control. Steve Harvey turned to address the audience and the cameras, his expression grave. Ladies and gentlemen, what we are witnessing here is an important conversation about power and control in marriage. Financial abuse is one of the most common forms of domestic abuse, but it is also one of the least recognized. It happens when one partner uses money as a tool to control the other partner, to limit their options, to make them dependent and powerless. He continued, speaking directly to viewers who might be in similar situations. If you are in a relationship where your partner controls all the money, where you have to ask permission to spend money on basic necessities, where you are made to feel guilty or wasteful for purchases that are reasonable and necessary, you are being financially abused. That is not normal. That is not what partnership looks like, and you deserve better. Steve looked back at Kenneth, his voice firm. Kenneth, your wife has just told you, in front of your children and in front of millions of people who will eventually watch this, that she feels trapped and powerless in your marriage because of your financial control. Your children have confirmed that they have witnessed this pattern throughout their lives. Your sister-in-law has described watching your wife's confidence and independence disappear over the years of your marriage. How do you respond to that? Kenneth's defensiveness seemed to crack slightly. When he spoke, his voice was quieter and less certain. I never intended to make Diane feel trapped or powerless. I thought I was protecting our family's financial interests by managing our money carefully. I thought I was being responsible. Steve shook his head. Kenneth, There is a difference between managing money carefully and controlling it completely. There is a difference between being responsible with finances and using finances to control your spouse. Your wife does not need you to protect your family's financial interests. She is perfectly capable of being involved in financial decisions. What she needed was for you to treat her as an equal partner with equal access to information and resources. But you chose not to do that, and the result is that she feels trapped in a marriage where she has no autonomy and no power. Steve made a decision in that moment that would require significant resources, but that he believed was absolutely necessary. Diane, I am going to do something for you. I am going to connect you with a financial advisor who specializes in helping women rebuild their financial independence. I'm also going to pay for you to take the courses and exams you need to renew your CPA license, so that you have the option of returning to your profession if that is what you choose to do. And I'm going to connect you with a therapist who can help you work through the trauma of years of financial abuse and help you figure out what you want for your future. He turned back to Kenneth. And Kenneth, I'm going to strongly suggest that you also seek therapy to examine why you felt the need to maintain such complete control over your wife and your household finances. You need to understand that what you have been doing is abusive, whether you intended it to be or not, and that you have caused real harm to your wife and to your family. The game did not resume that day. Instead, the Morrison family was escorted backstage, where they met with counselors who provided immediate support and resources for addressing the financial abuse that had been revealed. Steve also arranged for Diane to meet with a financial advisor the following week to begin the process of establishing her own financial independence, regardless of what she ultimately decided about her marriage. The decision about whether to air the segment required careful consideration of both the educational value and the potential harm to the family. After extensive discussions with domestic violence experts and financial abuse specialists, and with Diane's permission, the decision was made to air the segment with appropriate content warnings and resources for viewers experiencing similar situations. When the episode aired 10 weeks later, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The segment went viral within hours, generating tens of millions of views and sparking intense conversations about financial control in marriages, the vulnerability created by economic dependence, and the ways in which traditional gender roles can trap women in situations where they have no power or autonomy. Thousands of women shared stories of their own experiences with financial abuse. They described similar patterns of having to ask for money, being questioned about their spending, having no access to bank accounts or credit cards, and feeling trapped because they had no independent means of support. Many expressed gratitude for seeing their experience validated on national television, and for having it clearly named as abuse rather than simply dismissed as one partner being more financially responsible than the other. Financial advisors and women's advocacy organizations reported significant increases in women seeking help to establish financial independence or to escape financially abusive relationships. Many specifically cited Diane's story as the catalyst that helped them recognize their own situations as abusive and motivated them to take action. The segment also generated important conversations about the risks inherent in traditional arrangements, where one spouse leaves the workforce to care for children or manage the household. Experts emphasized the importance of ensuring that the partner who is not earning income maintains access to financial resources and remains involved in financial decisions, precisely to avoid the kind of power imbalance that had developed in the Morrison marriage. Kenneth and Diane Morrison engaged in intensive individual and couples therapy following the taping. The process revealed the depth of the damage that had been done to their relationship and to Diane's sense of self over 12 years of financial control. Kenneth struggled to accept that his behavior had been abusive, initially insisting that he had simply been managing their finances responsibly. However, with consistent therapeutic intervention and the undeniable evidence of the harm his wife and children had described, he gradually began to recognize the problematic nature of his actions. Diane worked with the financial advisor Steve had connected her with to establish her own bank account, obtain her own credit card, and begin rebuilding her financial literacy and independence after years of being shut out of financial decisions. She also began the process of renewing her CPA license, taking courses to update her knowledge and prepare for the examination required to reactivate her certification. 6 months after the initial airing, the Morrison family participated in a follow-up interview. The changes in their relationship were immediately apparent. Diane sat with noticeably more confidence, her posture straighter and her voice stronger than it had been during the original taping. Kenneth appeared humbler and less self-assured, his demeanor suggesting someone who had been forced to confront uncomfortable truths about himself. Diane shared that she had successfully renewed her CPA license and had accepted a part-time position at an accounting firm that specialized in serving small businesses and nonprofit organizations. Having her own income and her own bank account had fundamentally changed her sense of self and her relationship with Kenneth. She no longer had to ask permission to spend money or justify her purchases. She had regained the financial independence she had given up 12 years earlier, and with it, she had regained much of the confidence and sense of self that had eroded during those years of dependence. Kenneth spoke with genuine remorse about his behavior and the harm it had caused. He acknowledged that he had used financial control to maintain power in the relationship, and that he had dismissed Diane's capabilities and contributions in order to justify that control. He described the work he had done in therapy to understand the roots of his need for dominance and to develop healthier patterns of relating to his wife as an equal partner. Sarah and Jason both expressed relief that the issues in their parents' marriage were finally being addressed openly. They described how witnessing their mother's journey toward independence had influenced their own understanding of what healthy relationships should look like, and had reinforced their commitment to building partnerships based on mutual respect and equality. 1 year after that April afternoon, when Steve Harvey set aside his entertainer persona to become a serious advocate for a woman trapped in financial abuse, the long-term impact of that moment continued to unfold. The segment had been incorporated into financial literacy programs, domestic violence prevention training, and marriage education courses across the country. It served as a clear example of how financial control operates in relationships and why financial independence is crucial for all partners in a marriage. Diane Morrison became an advocate for women's financial independence and empowerment. She spoke at events for women returning to the workforce after extended absences and shared her story to help others recognize financial abuse in their own relationships. She also worked with organizations that provided financial education and support to women leaving abusive relationships or seeking to establish economic independence. The moment when Diane Morrison spoke up on the Family Feud stage and revealed the financial control she had endured for 12 years became a watershed moment in public conversation about economic abuse in marriages. Steve Harvey's serious response, his immediate recognition of the situation as abuse rather than simply a disagreement about money management, validated the experiences of countless women and helped shift cultural understanding of what constitutes domestic abuse. If this story has resonated with you or helped you recognize problematic dynamics in your own relationship or the relationships of people you care about, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share this story with someone who might need to hear it. Most importantly, understand that financial control is a form of abuse, that economic dependence creates vulnerability that can be exploited, and that everyone in a relationship deserves access to financial resources and involvement in financial decisions. Diane Morrison's courage in speaking her truth on national television, and Steve Harvey's willingness to take her seriously and provide concrete support rather than simply moving on with the game, demonstrated that sometimes the most important thing we can do is recognize when someone is asking for help and respond with the seriousness and support that situation demands. Marriage should be a partnership of equals, not a relationship where one person holds all the power and the other person has none. Financial independence is not just about having money. It is about having choices, having autonomy, and having the ability to make decisions about your own life without being entirely dependent on another person's permission and approval.